History books will tell you about the treaties signed in 1819, but they won't tell you about the wager that nearly tore the British aristocracy apart. It happened at Almack's, the most exclusive club in London, where a drunken duke made a joke at the expense of a quiet wallflower. He told the room, "If that spinster can best me in a match, I'll marry her on the spot." He thought it was comedy. He didn't know he was speaking to the finest marksman in England. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the brutal, scandalous, true story of how a marriage founded on a bullet changed everything. The heat inside the assembly rooms at Almack's was not merely a matter of temperature. It was a suffocating pressure of judgment. To be admitted here was a triumph. To be ignored here was a death sentence. Lady Emma Vale stood near the refreshments table, a glass of lukewarm lemonade sweating in her gloved hand. She was 26 years old, a catastrophic age for an unmarried woman in Regency London. She was not ugly, but she possessed a stillness that the ton mistook for dullness. Her hair was a sensible chestnut, her eyes a sharp, observant grey, and her gown, while silk, was a shade of lavender that had been fashionable 3 years prior. She was invisible, and usually she preferred it that way. Across the room, the centre of gravity shifted. Sebastian Belinda, the 8th Duke of Harrogate, had entered. Sebastian was everything Emma was not, loud, vibrant, and dangerously wealthy. He was 30 years old, possessing the kind of dark, brooding aesthetics that made young debutantes weep into their pillows. But tonight, the Duke was not brooding. He was intoxicated. He held court near the orchestra, a crystal goblet of smuggled French brandy in his hand, swaying slightly as he regaled a circle of sycophants, including the odious Lord Frederick Mouton and the young, impressionable Viscount Ealing. "The season is a meat market," Sebastian announced, his voice carrying over the polite strains of a string quartet. "A parade of fillies, paraded by mothers with calculators for hearts. Oh, come now, Harrogate," Lord Frederick tittered, glancing nervously at the patronesses. "Surely there is one flower in the garden you'd wish to pluck?" Sebastian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He turned, his gaze sweeping the room with the arrogance of a predator who knows he has no natural enemies. His eyes landed, unfortunately, on Emma. She stiffened. She saw the recognition in his eyes, not of her person, but of her status as the perpetual wallflower, the woman who had been rejected by 3 suitors in her first season and had ceased trying in her 4th. "That one," Sebastian slurred, gesturing loosely with his glass, sloshing amber liquid onto the floor. "Lady Emma, the Vale spinster. Look at her, standing there like a statue of mediocrity." The music seemed to stop. The conversations nearby died instantly. Emma felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her cold. "Harrogate, hush!" Viscount Ealing hissed. "Why?" Sebastian stepped forward, the crowd parting before him. He was cruel when he drank, a defense mechanism against a life he found intensely boring. "I bet she's never felt a rapid heartbeat in her life. She's as exciting as a wet Sunday in Shropshire." Emma carefully placed her lemonade on the table. The glass clinked against the silver tray. The sound was small, but in the sudden silence it rang like a bell. She walked toward him. It was the most shocking thing she had ever done. A lady did not confront a duke. She retreated and wept. But Emma Vale was tired. She was tired of the pity, tired of the loneliness, and tired of men like Sebastian Belinda, believing the world was their personal playground. She stopped 3 feet from him. Up close, he smelled of expensive tobacco and cedar, masked by the brandy. "Your Grace," she said. Her voice was low, but it did not tremble. "It must be a heavy burden." Sebastian blinked, looking down at her. "What? To be so vastly superior to everyone else," she continued. "It must be exhausting to be so perfect that you feel entitled to humiliate those who have done you no wrong." The room gasped. Lord Frederick looked as though he might faint. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. The fog of alcohol cleared slightly, replaced by a spark of irritation. "I speak only the truth, my lady. You are decorative furniture, harmless, useless. Useless, Emma tilted her head. I wager I can do many things better than you, Your Grace. Apart from drinking, of course. You clearly have the advantage there. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being mocked. Name it, Sebastian challenged, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Name the pursuit. Cards, horses, poetry? Shooting, Emma said. The word hung in the air. Sebastian stared at her for a long moment, and then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. It was a genuine, belly-shaking laugh that made the chandeliers tremble. Shooting? He wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. You? A pistol? My dear woman, you'd break your wrist from the recoil. You'd faint at the smell of black powder. Is that a refusal? Emma asked coolly. Is the Duke of Harrogate afraid of a spinster? Sebastian stopped laughing. His pride, brittle and massive, had been pricked. He stepped closer, towering over her. The menace was real now. Very well, he sneered. A match. Tomorrow at dawn. Hyde Park. Target shooting at 20 paces. And to make it interesting, let us set a wager. I have no money that would interest you, Emma said. I don't want your money, Sebastian sneered. He looked around the room, performing for his audience. If you win, if you can actually best me, I will grant you the only thing you women seem to want. I will marry you. I will make you a duchess. The collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. And if I lose, Emma asked, then you will leave London, Sebastian said cruelly. You will retire to the country and never darken a ballroom with your dour presence again. Emma looked at him. She saw the cruelty, the boredom, the arrogance. She also saw a man who had never been told no in his life. Accept it, she whispered. She turned and walked out of Almack's, her head high. She did not run. But inside, her heart was hammering a rhythm of absolute terror. She hadn't fired a gun in 6 years. The dawn mist over Hyde Park was thick, curling around the ankles of the men who had gathered. It was supposed to be a private affair. But in London, there was no such thing as a secret. Word of the Almack's wager had spread through the clubs, Whites, Boodles, Brookses, like wildfire. By 5:30 a.m., a crowd of nearly 50 gentlemen and a few daring ladies in carriages had gathered near the dueling grounds. Sebastian Belinda stood by his carriage, looking pale. The brandy had worn off, leaving behind a headache that felt like a nail being driven into his temple. He adjusted his cravat, feeling the heavy weight of regret. What have I done? He thought. He watched the fog. He half expected, no, he hoped, that she wouldn't show up. It had been a drunken jest. If she failed to appear, he could claim victory by default, make a joke of it, and perhaps send her a quietly apologetic piece of jewelry later to smooth things over. She's here, Lord Frederick whispered. A modest black carriage rolled out of the mist. The door opened, and Emma Vale stepped out. She was not wearing a ball gown today. She wore a dark riding habit of severe navy wool, cut closer to the body than was strictly fashionable, allowing for movement. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, severe braid. She wore no bonnet. She looked small against the backdrop of the park's ancient oaks. Sebastian walked to meet her. He tried to summon his arrogance, but it felt hollow. Lady Emma, I am surprised. I assumed you would have come to your senses. I am not in the habit of breaking promises, Your Grace, she said. Her face was pale, her eyes dark circles of sleeplessness, but her hands, gloved in soft kid leather, were steady at her sides. We can call this off, Sebastian said, his voice low so the spectators couldn't hear. Go home. I will tell them I apologized. We end this farce. And admit I am useless. Emma looked at him. No. The arbiter for the match was Colonel Tobias Halloway, a gruff veteran of the Peninsular Wars who respected the Duke but loved a good gamble more. He stepped forward, holding a mahogany case. The weapons, the colonel announced. A pair of Manton dueling pistols, flintlock, hair triggers, rifled barrels. Sebastian took one. It was familiar, heavy, a comforting extension of his arm. He was a sportsman. He spent his autumns in Scotland shooting stag, and his winters in Norfolk shooting pheasant. He was not the best shot in England, but he was excellent. Emma took the other pistol. Sebastian watched her closely, expecting her to fumble the weight. She didn't. She checked the flint. She checked the priming pan. Her movements were economic, precise, and practiced. She held the weapon not like a lady holding a dead fish, but like a carpenter holding a hammer, a tool. A chill went down Sebastian's spine. "The target!" Colonel Holloway shouted. "The ace of spades, pinned to the oak tree. 20 paces." The crowd murmured. An ace of spades was a tiny target at that distance. "Ladies first," Sebastian said, gesturing. Emma stepped up to the mark. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at Sebastian. She stared at the white rectangle of paper on the dark bark of the tree. She closed her eyes for a second. "Breathe," she told herself. "Just as grandfather taught you, the world is noise. The target is silence." Her grandfather, the late Earl of Oakhaven, had wanted a grandson. He got Emma. Instead of needlepoint, he had taught her ballistics. Instead of French, he taught her windage. For 10 years, on a lonely estate in the north, she had fired thousands of rounds, destroying pumpkins, bottles, and playing cards, desperate for the only approval she ever received. She opened her eyes. She raised her arm. She did not hesitate. There was no wavering. Crack! The sound was deafening in the morning quiet. Smoke billowed from the barrel, obscuring her figure for a moment. A runner sprinted to the tree. He pulled the card down and ran back, his face pale. He handed the card to Colonel Holloway. "Dead center," Holloway announced, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Through the spade." The silence that followed was absolute. Sebastian stared at the card. A perfect hole punched through the black ink. "Luck," Lord Frederick whispered behind him. "Pure blind luck." It was Sebastian's turn. He stepped up. The pressure was suddenly crushing. He wasn't just shooting for a wager. He was shooting for his life. If he lost, he had to marry this ghost of a woman. He raised his pistol. His hand was shaking. Just a fraction. The hangover, the shock, the fear. He steadied himself. He fired. Crack! The runner went to the tree. He came back slower this time. Holloway took the card. He looked at Sebastian, then at the ground. "The Duke!" Holloway cleared his throat. "The Duke has clipped the edge of the card. But he has not hit the spade." Emma didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She lowered her pistol and turned to Sebastian. The crowd erupted into chaos. Money was changing hands. Men were shouting. Sebastian stood frozen. The smell of sulfur was in his nose, stinging and sharp. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, for the first time. She wasn't a wallflower. She was a statue made of iron. He walked over to her. The arrogance was gone, stripped away by the bullet. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I am Emma Vale," she said, handing her pistol to the colonel. "And I believe, Your Grace, that we have a wedding to plan." The wedding of the Duke of Harrogate to Lady Emma Vale was the social event of the decade, not because of its grandeur, but because of its morbidity. It felt less like a celebration, and more like a public execution, where the prisoner was also the groom. The tabloids had dubbed it the gunpowder match. Emma stood at the altar, her veil thick enough to obscure her expression. She wore white, as was becoming fashionable, but she felt grey. She had won. But as she looked at Sebastian's rigid back, she realized she had also lost. She had forced a man to marry her. She had secured her future, saved herself from the life of a spinster aunt living on charity, but at the cost of her dignity. Sebastian recited his vows like a man reading a legal deposition. "I, Sebastian, take thee, Emma." His voice was devoid of emotion. His hand, when he took hers to slide the ring on, was cold. As they walked back down the aisle, the pews were filled with whispering peers. Caught him in a trap, she heard Lady Jersey whisper. Poor Harrogate, said another. They exited into the bright sunlight. The carriage awaited. The ride to Harrogate House, Sebastian's massive London residence, was conducted in total silence. Emma stared out the window. Sebastian stared at his boots. When they arrived, the servants were lined up, looking anxious. They knew the circumstances. The staff always knew. Sebastian led her into the grand foyer. The black and white marble tiles gleamed. Madam, he said, turning to her. It was the first time he had spoken to her since the church. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, will show you to your quarters. Our quarters? Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. Sebastian laughed, a dry, humourless sound. Do not mistake this legal arrangement for a romance, Emma. You won a wager. You have my title. You have my protection. You have access to my fortune. But you do not have me. He pulled off his gloves, slapping them into his palm. I will continue my life as I see fit. I will spend my evenings where I choose. You will manage the household, look decorative at functions, and ensure the Harrogate name is not dragged further into the mud than you have already dragged it. I see, Emma said. She felt tears pricking her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. And what if I desire companionship? Buy a dog, Sebastian said. He turned on his heel and walked out the front door, leaving his bride standing alone in the center of the echoing hall. Emma watched him go. The heavy oak door slammed shut, the sound reverberating like a gunshot, the second gunshot of their acquaintance. She stood there for a long minute. Then she took a deep breath. She had faced down a target at 20 paces. She could face down a cold house. Mrs. Gable, Emma said, turning to the stunned housekeeper, please prepare a bath, and bring me the ledgers for the household accounts. If I am to run this house, I intend to do it efficiently. 2 weeks later. The marriage was a polite war. They met at breakfast. They exchanged pleasantries about the weather. They sat at opposite ends of a dining table long enough to host a cricket match. But strange things began to happen. Emma, bored by the isolation, began to explore Harrogate House. It was a museum of neglect. The library was in disarray. The gardens were overgrown. Sebastian threw money at problems, but he gave them no attention. One evening, searching for a book in the Duke's private study, a room she was forbidden to enter, she found something that stopped her cold. It wasn't a love letter from a mistress. It wasn't a bottle of opium. It was a ledger. But not a household ledger. It was a record of debts. Massive, crippling debts. Emma sat down at his desk, her heart pounding. She traced the numbers. The Duke of Harrogate, one of the richest men in England, was bleeding money. There were payments listed to names she didn't recognize. Mr. Silas Vane. The Rookery Syndicate. These weren't gambling debts. The sums were consistent, monthly, like rent or blackmail. What are you doing? The voice came from the doorway. Emma jumped. Sebastian was standing there. He had come home early, his cravat undone, his hair disheveled. He looked furious. I was looking for a book, she stammered. Sebastian crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed the ledger from under her hand and slammed it shut. You have no business here, he snarled. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a frantic sort of panic she had never seen before. Sebastian, she said, standing up, that is not gambling debt. Who is Silas Vane? Why are you paying him £5,000 a month? Get out, Sebastian whispered. I am your wife, she said, finding her courage. Your debts are my debts. If you are in trouble, you cannot help me, he shouted. The raw anguish in his voice shocked her. You think because you can shoot a pistol you understand the world? You understand nothing, Emma. Nothing. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. If you value your life, he said, his voice shaking, you will forget that name. You will forget you saw this book. And you will never come in this room again. Emma looked at him. She saw the anger, yes, but beneath it, she saw something else. Terror. The Duke of Harrogate was terrified. I cannot forget, Emma said softly. I am the Duchess of Harrogate now, and I do not lose." She walked past him, brushing his arm. He didn't pull away. He stood there, breathing heavily, clutching the book like a shield. As Emma climbed the stairs to her lonely room, she realized the shooting match had been the easy part. The real game had just begun. London was a city of two faces. There was the face of Mayfair, with its limestone facades, manicured squares, and the scent of jasmine tea. And then there was the face of St. Giles, the Rookery, a labyrinth of crumbling tenements, open sewers, and gin shops where a life could be bought for a sixpence. Emma knew Mayfair. She was learning that her husband's life was tethered to the Rookery. For 3 days after discovering the ledger, Emma did not confront Sebastian again. Instead, she utilized the very trait that had made her a miserable debutante, her invisibility. She visited the family solicitor, Meister, Thaddeus Moore, a man whose skin was as dry as the parchment he hoarded. She claimed she was organizing the household papers. In reality, she was hunting for the name Silas Vane. Vane? Mr. Moore had choked on his tea, his eyes darting around his dusty office. "Your Grace, that is a name best left unspoken. He is a facilitator, a man who acquires things that should not be acquired and sells things that should not be sold." "He holds debt over the Duke," Emma pressed. "Not debt, Your Grace," Moore whispered, leaning in. "Leverage." Emma returned to Harrogate House with a knot of dread in her stomach. She sat in the blue drawing room, pretending to embroider, but her mind was racing. Sebastian was not a gambler. He was a victim. The clock on the mantel struck 2 in the morning. Sebastian had not come home. This was not unusual, but tonight the air felt heavy. A summer storm was brewing, rattling the window panes. Then the front door crashed open. Emma dropped her embroidery hoop. She rushed into the foyer. Sebastian was leaning against the wall, clutching his side. His cravat was missing, his lip was split, and blood was seeping through his white linen shirt. "Sebastian!" She ran to him, catching him just as his knees buckled. He was heavy, smelling of rain and copper. "Don't," he groaned, trying to push her away. "Don't look at me." "Stop being a fool," she snapped, adrenaline replacing her fear. She shouted for the footman, but Sebastian clamped a hand over her mouth. "No servants," he hissed, his eyes wild with pain. "No one can know. Help me. Upstairs." It took every ounce of Emma's strength to haul him up the grand staircase. She got him into his bedchamber, a room she had never entered, and dumped him onto the vast 4-poster bed. She didn't wait for permission. She ripped his shirt open. There was a long, jagged slice across his ribs. It wasn't deep enough to be fatal, but it was ugly. A knife wound. "Who did this?" she demanded, grabbing a basin of water and a towel from his washstand. "A warning," Sebastian gasped, wincing as she pressed the cold cloth to the wound. "I was late with the payment." "Silas Vane?" Sebastian looked at her, his defenses finally crumbling under the weight of his exhaustion. "Yes." Emma worked in silence for a moment, cleaning the wound with the precision of a field medic. "Why do you pay him? You are a duke. You could have him arrested. You could have him crushed." "I can't," Sebastian whispered. He looked up at the ceiling, tears of frustration leaking from the corners of his eyes. "He has letters, Emma. Letters written by my father." Emma paused. The late Duke had been a war hero, a celebrated admiral. "My father was not the patriot England thinks he was," Sebastian said, the words tumbling out like stones. "During the blockade of 1812, he had financial difficulties. He sold information to the French, naval routes, cargo manifests." Emma froze. This was high treason. If this came out, the Harrogate title would be stripped, the estate seized. Sebastian would be destitute, perhaps even hanged for concealing it. "Vane found the correspondence," Sebastian continued, his voice hollow. "He has been bleeding me dry for 3 years. I have sold the unentailed land. I have sold the art. I have nothing left to give him. Tonight. I told him that. He gestured to his bleeding side. This was his reply. Emma finished bandaging him. She washed her hands, the water turning pink. She looked at the man lying on the bed. He wasn't the arrogant bully from Almack's. He was a son trying to bury a father's sin, drowning in a legacy he didn't choose. She sat on the edge of the bed. You cannot pay him, she said softly. Blackmailers are like fires, Sebastian. If you feed them, they only grow larger. I have no choice. He closed his eyes. I will not let my family name be destroyed. I will not let you be dragged into the street. I am already dragged in, she said. I am your wife. Sebastian opened his eyes. He reached out, his hand trembling, and brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek. It was the first tender touch he had ever offered her. I am sorry, he whispered. I mocked you. I underestimated you. And now I have trapped you in a burning house. I am good with fire, Emma said. She took his hand. It was warm. Rest now. We will deal with Silas Vane together. There is no together in this, Sebastian murmured, the laudanum she had slipped into his water finally taking effect. I have to end it. He drifted into sleep. Emma sat there until dawn, listening to his breathing. She realized with a start that she no longer hated him. And that was dangerous. Because if she cared, she had something to lose. And Emma Vale played to win. The truce between the Duke and Duchess shifted the atmosphere of Harrogate House. The silence was no longer cold. It was conspiratorial. They were soldiers in a foxhole, waiting for the enemy to crest the hill. But Silas Vane was not a patient enemy. 2 weeks after the attack, a package arrived for the Duchess. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with rough twine. Emma opened it at the breakfast table. Inside was a single, perfect white rose. The petals were scorched black at the edges. Pinned to the stem was a note. The flower fades when the sun sets. Midnight. The masquerade. Sebastian snatched the note from her hand. His face went ashen. He knows, Sebastian said, crushing the paper. He knows I care about you. He's shifting the target. The masquerade? Emma asked calmly, though her heart hammered. Lord Ealing's ball tonight? We are not going. Sebastian stood up, pacing the room. I'm sending you to the country, to the Scottish estate. You'll leave within the hour. I will not, Emma buttered her toast. Her hand shook, but she forced the knife to move smoothly. If I run, he sees fear. If he sees fear, he strikes. We go to the ball. Emma, this isn't a game of whist, Sebastian shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The china rattled. This man is a killer. He runs the most vicious gang in 7 dials. He will not hesitate to hurt you to get to me. Then we must stop him before he does, she said. She looked up at him. You said he has the letters. Where does he keep them? He carries them, Sebastian said. He's paranoid. He keeps the packet on his person, in an oilskin pouch. He taunts me with it. Good, Emma's grey eyes hardened. Then we know where the target is. No, Sebastian shook his head, looking at her with a mix of awe and horror. Absolutely not. I know that look. You are planning something insane. I am planning a win, Sebastian. Tonight, at the masquerade, everyone will be in disguise. You say he wants to meet you? Fine. You will meet him, and while you distract him, you will what? Pick his pocket? Sebastian scoffed. No, Emma stood up. I will take the shot. Underscore, 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 underscore. The masquerade ball, midnight Lord Ealing's mansion, was a kaleidoscope of silk, velvet, and feathers. Hundreds of guests hid behind masks of Venetian plaster and gilded papier-mâché. The air was thick with perfume and the frantic energy of the late season. Emma wore a domino of midnight blue velvet and a silver mask that covered the upper half of her face. Hidden in the folds of her skirt, weighing down the silk, was a small double-barreled pocket pistol. It wasn't the dueling pistol she favored. It was inaccurate and short-ranged, but it was lethal at close quarters. She spotted Sebastian across the room. He was dressed as a highwayman, a grim irony that wasn't lost on her. He stood near the balcony doors, rigid with tension. He had agreed to her plan only because she had threatened to go to the Bow Street runners, the police force, if he didn't. He knew that would ensure the letters were released. A man approached Sebastian. He was dressed in a red domino, wearing a mask of a devil. He didn't move like a gentleman. He moved with the rolling, predatory gait of a street fighter. Silas Vane. Emma drifted closer, using the crowd as cover. She saw Vane lean in close to Sebastian. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw Sebastian stiffen. Vane patted his chest, the left breast pocket. The letters are there. Vane gestured to the balcony. Sebastian nodded and followed him out into the cool night air. Emma waited 10 seconds, then followed. The balcony was long and shadowy, overlooking the dark gardens. The music from inside was muffled here. She hid behind a stone pillar. "Tired of the scraps, Your Grace," Vane was saying. His voice was gravel and smoke. "The price has gone up. I want the deed to the Sussex property, and I want a seat on the board of the East India Company." "That is impossible," Sebastian replied, his voice steady. "I cannot grant you a board seat." "Then the Morning Chronicle gets a fascinating history lesson tomorrow," Vane chuckled. He pulled a cigar from his pocket. "And maybe your pretty wife has an accident. Horses can be so skittish." Emma stepped out from behind the pillar. "The only accident here, Mr. Vane," she said, her voice clear and icy, "will be yours." Vane spun around. Sebastian looked terrified. "Emma, get back!" Vane laughed. "The little wife. Isn't this sweet?" He reached into his coat, not for the letters, but for a knife. The blade glinted in the moonlight. "Give my husband the letters," Emma said, raising her right hand. The small pistol was leveled at Vane's chest. Vane paused, eyeing the gun. Then he sneered. "Toy gun! Trembling hand! You won't shoot, Duchess. You don't have the stomach for blood." He took a step toward her. "Emma, run!" Sebastian lunged at Vane. It happened in a blur. Vane, younger and faster, sidestepped Sebastian and drove his elbow into the Duke's injured ribs. Sebastian crumbled with a cry of pain. Vane turned back to Emma, grinning. "Now, let's teach you a lesson about interrupting men." He lunged. Emma didn't tremble. She didn't blink. She remembered the ace of spades. Crack! The shot was quiet compared to the dueling pistol, a sharp pop. Vane jerked backward, clutching his shoulder. She had aimed for the non-lethal spot, just below the clavicle, to disable his knife arm. He roared in pain and dropped the knife. "The letters!" Emma shouted. Sebastian scrambled up, ignoring his pain. He tackled the wounded Vane, driving him into the stone balustrade. They grappled, the red domino and the black highwayman coat twisting together. Vane was strong, even wounded. He shoved Sebastian back and reached into his coat with his good hand. He pulled out the oilskin packet. "You want it?" Vane snarled, blood dripping down his arm. He held the packet over the edge of the balcony. Below, a decorative fountain churned. "If I drop this, the ink runs. The proof is gone. But I'll tell the world anyway." "No!" Sebastian lunged. Vane threw the packet. Not down, but outward, into the darkness of the garden. "Fetch, dog!" Vane laughed. Sebastian looked at the packet sailing through the air, then at Vane. "Go!" Emma screamed at Sebastian. "Find it! I have him!" She cocked the second barrel of her pistol. Sebastian hesitated for a split second, looking at his wife holding a criminal at gunpoint. Then he vaulted over the railing, dropping into the hedges below to hunt for the papers. Emma was alone with Silas Vane. Vane looked at her. He was bleeding, pale, but his eyes were full of malice. "You emptied your chamber, darling," he wheezed. "That's a single-shot mechanism on those ladies' toys." Emma felt a cold dread. He was lying. Wasn't he? It was a double-barreled box lock. But had the mechanism jammed? Vane took a step forward. "Now I'm going to kill you." Emma pulled the trigger. Click. A misfire. Vane grinned, his teeth red with blood. He picked up his knife from the floor. Emma backed up, hitting the stone railing. She had nowhere to go. The music inside played a cheerful waltz, masking the silent struggle on the balcony. Vane raised the knife. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the roofline above. A figure dropped down, landing silently behind Vane. A heavy cane cracked against the back of Vane's skull. Vane crumbled instantly, unconscious. Emma gasped, clutching the railing. Standing over the body was not Sebastian. It was an older man, dressed in grey, with a face like granite. "Sloppy," the man said, looking at Vane's body, "but courageous." Who are you?" Emma stammered. The man tipped his hat. "John Townsend, Bow Street runner. I've been watching Mr. Vane for months. We've been waiting for him to slip up and assault a peer." Townsend looked at Emma. "Your husband is looking for papers in the bushes. I suggest you go help him. I'll handle the trash." Emma didn't wait. She gathered her skirts and ran for the stairs to the garden. She found Sebastian on his knees in the mud near the fountain. He was frantically tearing through the ivy. "Sebastian!" He looked up. He was holding the oilskin packet. It was damp on the outside, but sealed. "I found it," he breathed, clutching it to his chest. "It's safe." He stood up and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was desperate, fierce. He buried his face in her neck, shaking. I thought he would kill you," Sebastian choked out. "I had a misfire," Emma admitted, her knees finally shaking. "Mr. Townsend, he saved me." "Townsend," Sebastian pulled back. "The runner? If he finds these papers—" "He won't," Emma said. "He wants Vane for other crimes. Burn them, Sebastian. Burn them now." Sebastian looked at the packet. He pulled a silver lighter from his pocket. With trembling hands, he lit the corner of the oilskin. They watched in silence as the legacy of the 7th Duke, the treason, the shame, the blackmail, curled into ash and drifted into the fountain. As the last flame died, Sebastian looked at her. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. "You saved my life," he said. "You saved my honor." "I told you," Emma said, trying to smile, though her face was wet with tears. "I intend to win." Sebastian didn't smile. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The wager is over, Emma," he said softly. "You won the match. You won the game against Vane." He stepped closer. "But I think," he whispered, "that I am the one who has won the greatest prize." He kissed her. It wasn't the cold peck at the altar. It was a kiss of relief, of adrenaline, and of a passion that had been kindled in gunpowder and blood. For a moment, under the moonlight, everything was perfect. But history is rarely that kind. As they walked back towards the carriage, exhausted and muddy, a messenger boy ran up to the gates of the mansion. "Telegram!" the boy shouted. "Telegram for the Duke of Harrogate." Sebastian took the paper. He read it under the light of the carriage lamp. Emma watched the color drain from his face, leaving him paler than he had been when facing the knife. "What is it?" she asked. Sebastian looked at her, his eyes wide with a new, different kind of horror. "It's from the King's Court," he whispered. "Someone has challenged the validity of our marriage. They claim the license was forged." He crumpled the telegram. "They are coming to take you away, Emma. They say you are not the Duchess." The scandal of the gunpowder match had been a bonfire. The challenge to the marriage was an inferno. The man behind the telegram was Archibald Belinda, Sebastian's cousin and heir presumptive. Archibald was a man of soft hands and hard ambitions. For years, he had waited for Sebastian to drink himself into an early grave or die in a riding accident. The marriage to Emma had threatened his inheritance. A potential heir would destroy it. So Archibald had struck at the foundation. He had bribed a clerk at the Doctors' Commons to misplace the registration of their special license. Without that piece of paper, in the eyes of the law and the church, Emma was not a duchess. She was a mistress, the ecclesiastical court, Doctors' Commons. The courtroom smelled of dry rot and moral superiority. It was packed. The ton had arrived in droves, hungry for the spectacle of a duke being dismantled. Emma sat on a wooden bench, her back straight, though she felt nausea rolling in waves. She was forbidden to sit with Sebastian. He sat on the opposite side, looking ready to commit murder. His hands were clenched so tightly on his knees that his knuckles were white. Archibald stood in the center of the room. He wore a suit of somber black, playing the part of the concerned relative to perfection. "My lords," Archibald addressed the panel of bishops and judges, "it brings me no joy to bring this suit. But the sanctity of the dukedom is at stake. My cousin, the Duke, is known for his erratic behavior. His drinking, his gambling." He turned to the audience, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "We all know the story. A drunken wager at Almack's, a duel in the park. Is this the behavior of a sane man entering a holy union? Or is it the madness of a man coerced by a woman, seeking to entrap him?" Emma felt the eyes of the room burning into her. Entrapment. The word hung in the air like smoke. "And now," Archibald continued, producing a ledger, "we find that the license was never properly registered. There is no record. The marriage is a fiction. Lady Emma is merely a companion." The Bishop of London, a man with eyebrows like bushy caterpillars, peered over his spectacles at Sebastian. "Your Grace," the bishop intoned, "how do you answer?" Sebastian stood up. He looked tired. The stress of the blackmail, the attack, and now this, had etched deep lines into his face. But his voice was steady. "My lords," Sebastian said, "my cousin speaks of madness. He speaks of coercion. It is true that the marriage began with a wager. I was foolish. I was arrogant." He looked across the room at Emma. His eyes softened, ignoring the hundreds of people watching. "But the license was real. I purchased it myself. If the record is missing, it is because thievery is afoot, not deceit." "Thievery?" Archibald scoffed. "A convenient excuse. Perhaps the Duke would like to explain why he married a spinster with no dowry, no connections, and a reputation for being odd? Unless his mind was clouded by spirits?" "I married her," Sebastian said, his voice rising, "because she is the only person in this city with a spine. I married her because she is my equal." "Sentiments do not constitute a legal document," Archibald shouted. "The law requires proof. Without the registry, she is nothing." The gavel banged. "The court will adjourn for 3 days," the bishop announced. "The Duke has 72 hours to produce the physical copy of the license or proof of registry. If he cannot, the union is declared null and void. Lady Emma will be returned to her family. The Duke's estate will be placed under trusteeship, with Mr. Archibald Belinda as executor." Harrogate House that evening. The house was silent. The servants moved like ghosts. Sebastian was tearing the library apart. Books were thrown on the floor. Drawers were overturned. "It has to be here!" he yelled, throwing a stack of papers against the wall. "I put it in the safe. I know I did." Emma stood by the fireplace. She knew Archibald. He was thorough. If he had bribed the clerk, he had likely bribed a servant to steal the copy from their home, too. "Sebastian," she said gently. "Stop." He froze, breathing heavily. He looked at her, his eyes wild with panic. "They are going to take you away. They are going to annul us. I will lose you." He walked over to her and fell to his knees, burying his face in her skirts. "I cannot lose you," he sobbed. It was the first time she had seen him cry since the night of the knifing. "I have spent my whole life being lonely in a room full of people. You are the only real thing I have." Emma stroked his hair. She felt a fierce, protective anger rising in her chest. This wasn't about titles anymore. It was about them. "We need a plan," she said. "Archibald expects us to look for the paper. We won't find it. He has destroyed it." "Then we are lost," Sebastian said. "No," Emma said. Her mind was racing, calculating angles and windage, just as she did on the shooting range. "If we cannot prove the law, we must appeal to the one thing that overrides the law." Sebastian looked up. "What?" "The crown," Emma said. "The Prince Regent loves a scandal, but he loves a romance more. and he despises Archibald. Do you remember when Archibald insulted the prince's waistline at the opera? Sebastian let out a short, wet laugh. I do. We are going to Carlton House, Emma said. We are going to beg an audience, and we are going to make a new wager. Getting an audience with the Prince Regent, the future George IV, was usually impossible on short notice, but the gunpowder match was the talk of the town, and Prinny was nothing if not curious. They were ushered into the gold drawing room. The prince sat on a velvet divan, eating a sugared plum. He was a large man, corseted tightly, with a face that was both dissolute and strangely perceptive. Archibald was there too. He had been summoned, looking smug. So, the prince said, licking sugar from his fingers, the Lovers and the Vulture. It is better than a play. Your Royal Highness, Archibald bowed low. This is a legal matter. The church is boring. The prince waved a hand. I am bored, Archibald. This week has been nothing but rain and taxes. He turned his heavy-lidded eyes to Emma. You are the woman who shoots, the prince said. They say you put a ball through a playing card at 20 paces. Is it true? It is, Your Highness, Emma curtsied deep. And you, the prince looked at Sebastian. You claim you love her, that this isn't just a drunkard's mistake. I love her more than my life, Sebastian said, and I would stake my dukedom on it. The prince sat up. A stake? I like stakes. Emma stepped forward. This was the gamble, the biggest shot of her life. Your Highness, she said clearly, my husband's cousin claims I am a fraud, and that our marriage is invalid because a piece of paper is missing. He claims I am not fit to be a duchess. She paused. I propose a test, a trial by skill. If I can prove my worth, if I can prove that I am indeed the shooting duchess that the people speak of, then Your Highness uses your royal prerogative to validate our marriage, regardless of the missing registry. And if you fail, the prince asked, his eyes gleaming, then I will sign the annulment myself, Emma said, and I will enter a nunnery. No, Sebastian started, but Emma squeezed his hand. The prince clapped his hands. Delightful. But what is the test? A target? A duel? Archibald stepped in, his eyes narrowing. He saw a trap, but he also saw a chance to humiliate her. If there is to be a test, Your Highness, let it be a real challenge, not a stationary card. Archibald pointed out the window to the vast gardens of Carlton House. The apple shot, Archibald sneered. William Tell, let the Duke stand at 30 paces. Let him hold an apple. If she shoots it off his hand, she wins. If she misses, well, she is a widow, and the problem resolves itself. The room went dead silent. It was a death sentence. 30 paces was a massive distance for a pistol. A variance of an inch would shatter Sebastian's hand or hit him in the chest. Acceptable, Sebastian said instantly. Sebastian, no, Emma whispered, her composure cracking. I can't. If I miss, you won't miss, Sebastian looked at her. His eyes were blue and clear. You never miss. The garden. 10 minutes later, the court had spilled out onto the lawn. The tension was palpable. Even the birds seemed to have gone silent. Sebastian stood by the rose bushes. He held a small green apple in his outstretched palm. He was not shaking. He looked at Emma with total, absolute trust. Emma stood 30 paces away. The pistol, her own Manton, retrieved from her carriage, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She raised the gun, her vision blurred. It's Sebastian. It's my husband. I can't do it. Shoot, Emma, Archibald taunted from the sidelines. Or do you admit defeat? She looked at Sebastian. He nodded. Just a small, barely perceptible nod. Breathe, she heard her grandfather's voice. The world is noise. The target is silence. She focused on the apple. She blocked out the prince, the crowd, Archibald's sneer. She blocked out her fear. She exhaled. She squeezed the trigger. Crack! The smoke cleared. Sebastian was still standing. His hand was empty. The apple was gone, obliterated into a spray of pulp that covered the rose bush behind him. For a second, no one moved. Then Sebastian smiled. He wiped apple pulp from his sleeve and bowed to Emma. The Prince Regent roared with delight, clapping his hands so hard his rings clicked. "Bravo, bravo! By God, that is a woman worth marrying." He turned to Archibald, who looked as though he had swallowed a lemon. "Archibald," the prince said, his voice turning cold, "you have bored me, and you have annoyed a duchess who can shoot a flea off a dog's ear. I suggest you retire to the country. Indefinitely." "But the registry," Archibald stammered. "I am the Prince Regent," the prince bellowed. "If I say they are married, they are married. I will sign the witness papers myself." 1 year later, the nurseries at Harrogate House were no longer silent. They were being painted a soft yellow. Emma sat in the garden, a book in her lap. She was no longer the grey, invisible spinster. She wore a gown of vibrant emerald green. Sebastian walked out of the house, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He sat beside her, kissing her cheek. "A letter from Archibald," Sebastian said, tossing it onto the table. "He begs for a loan. Apparently the roof of his cottage is leaking." "Send him a tarp," Emma smiled. "I was thinking," Sebastian said, looking out at the target range they had built near the orchard. "The little one will need a tutor." Emma rested her hand on her rounded stomach. "Indeed. Latin, French, piano." "And ballistics," Sebastian added. "Definitely ballistics," Emma agreed. She took her husband's hand. They didn't need wages anymore. They had won the match, but more importantly, they had won the life that came after it. The Duke and his shooting duchess lived not happily ever after, in the way of fairy tales, but happily in the way of real hard-fought love. They argued, they laughed, and every Sunday they went to the range, and Sebastian never, ever, bet against her again. And that is the incredible story of the gunpowder match. From a cruel joke at a ball, to a romance that defied death, debt, and the crown itself, Emma and Sebastian proved that love is the biggest gamble of all. If you enjoyed this deep dive into historical romance and drama, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story, where we'll uncover the scandal behind the Phantom Countess. And tell me in the comments, would you have taken the shot at the apple, or would you have folded? Let's argue about it down below. Thanks for watching.